Hello, I'm Jack from Super MMA Show. Today we're going to talk about MMA scoring, why it's not working, and what we can do to fix it.
Jack and Mel weigh in.
Welcome to Super MMA. If you're new, click the subscribe icon, the little bell if you like the content. It really helps us out. Please feel free to share, tag your friends in it if you think they'll dig it. And in the meantime, let's get into it. So I was having a conversation with a guy called Baggin Brook, or that's his username anyway, on one of our other videos. I think it was the eye poke video we did, so please be sure to check that out. We'll link it down below. And he was interested in seeing a video on scoring. We instantly jumped on it and said, yeah, that'd be a great video. And then last weekend at UFC 247, shit just hit the fan, and it makes total sense for us to get into it quickly now. My other half, Mel, and I are planning to do a joint video on this where we'll go into a lot more detail and discuss more options and more depth as to what we can do. So again, hit subscribe, make sure you don't miss that content. So MMA scored on a 10-point must system where one fighter must get 10 points. Very occasionally, two fighters can get 10 points, which can result in a draw. It originally came from boxing. I don't hate the 10-point must system. I think the issues with it are deeper than how its points are scored, which I'll get into in a minute. So the scoring hierarchy is octagon control, effective aggression, duration, dominance, and impact, which is damage. The scoring for striking is volume, damage, and knockdowns. And the grappling is control, dominant positions, and submissions. I think the problem you have is that if the judges aren't all on the same hymn sheet, which I will get to shortly, I think the issue that you have is a lack of education somewhat. They do go on these courses and they're supposed to know how to judge it, but the real issue the UFC have in combating this is that it's not actually technically them in charge. Each commission deals with it, but I think the UFC could do more to try and sway commissions to handle it in certain ways. So there is definitely some accountability on the UFC. I don't want to say blame because they can pass it off to the commissions. But the commissions at the end of the day are just doing what they see fit and what they see best. But we've had a couple of occasions where judges, have come out and said ridiculous things, like the famous one, leg kicks don't win fights. Well, having been kicked in the leg, I can assure you that's worse than getting punched in the head. With the Jones-Reyes fight as an example, a lot of people had that as a robbery. It definitely wasn't. No close fight is a robbery. I, at the time, had it scored for Reyes, but after watching it again, I think it was actually Jones that stole the third. And there's an argument for him to have scored the second as well, but I don't think so. But it did highlight some of the questions with judging and exactly what it is that they're scoring whenever they're looking at these fights. So there's many examples of robberies that have happened. One famous one was the Hendricks and GSP fight, which I think many people think was a robbery, but the Jones-Reyes fight was just a close fight. Some judges might score a takedown where there's maybe no control. To me, a takedown doesn't score if you have zero control after. If that person pops right back up, all that person's done is exerted a lot of energy getting them down to the ground, and that's it. But grappling in general, I think, gets underscored to an extent sometimes, and I think the threat of it as well, which we saw in the Jones-Reyes fight, you have to factor in the grappling exchanges, especially in that third round. So what can we do? Well, it's a tough call. One of the things that we could look at is open scoring. Kansas, I think, have just announced that they're going to trial this in some of their, Invicta said they're going to give it a go. So the fighters will know what the scores are in between rounds. Two trains of thought on that. One, it's going to cause people to push and push and push for the finish if they're 2 rounds down. But the other argument is that the fighter who knows they're 2 rounds up, well, they're just going to play chases, run around. They're going to turn their back, do what Jones did in the Reyes fight, do what Overeem's famous for doing, and just run around the ring. So what one's right? I don't really know. I like the idea of open scoring, but I would need to see it in practice first. To me, this is actually a really good example of something like Dana White's Contender Series and what it could potentially be used for. If you look at the WWE network and they have their, is it Nexus? It's like the sort of lower league of the WWE, and talent gets fed up to it, similar to the Contender Series in that way. I think that they could use that to start to implement some of these things to try if they can get the commissions on board. So you could maybe look at trialing some of the things for the UFC, like a redesigned glove, which again is in the eye poke video, or open scoring. You could look at implementing these in Contender Series where the stakes are slightly lower. You can see whether or not they work or not, get some fighter feedback from fighters who are involved. And then if it works, you can look at adopting it at the higher levels through the commissions. I like the idea of fighters knowing where they're at, and it could push for fighters to finish it. But to be fair, I find it really difficult to believe. You hear this all the time. It's like, well, if he just pushed in the third round, he could have finished him. It's remarkably difficult to punch someone who doesn't want to be punched, especially when they're skilled. Same with submissions. I think people who maybe haven't done any kind of sport like this at all, haven't competed in boxing or MMA or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or whatever it may be, I think they underestimate how difficult it is, and they're acting as if these fighters are going out there and not trying to finish their opponents. It might happen occasionally, but for that to happen, the skill divide has to be huge between the fighters. One of the other things I've seen is getting ex-fighters as judges. That's great on paper, because I personally, and I've judged MMA, this is the thing, I've judged 2 amateur events, including one of them in front of 3,000 people, and it's a tough job. You have to be right on. I was at the end of some booze at one of the fights where I had it, one judge had a 29-28 fighter A, one had a 29-28 for fighter B, and I had it a draw. Now, you tell me how I could possibly be the one at fault whenever the other two had completely opposite views. I had it scored that one of the rounds, I think the second, was so close that I just couldn't call it. That said, judging is a tough skill into itself, and I had a novice MMA fight. I had done a little bit of boxing training. I had competed, or hadn't competed, I was training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I think I had a slightly better understanding than perhaps someone who hadn't done any of that. But I was by no means, qualified at a high level to do it. I don't think you need to be a professional fighter to do it. I think that you just need to sort of understand it. And to me, it's really hard to describe, but watching the fights, you just kind of know. When I was scoring a fight, you just sort of know. You factor it all in, and you just get this image of who wins what round. But if you have a traditional boxing judge who's maybe doing this, perhaps they're looking at different things. If you have a pure grappler judging it, perhaps they're looking at different things. So I think that you kind of at least all need the judges to be on the same page. The judges definitely have it hard. Fighters doing it might not be a bad thing, because as I said, a lot of it is, I don't want to say it's gut, because it's observation combined with experience, combined with your gut, to paint that picture of what wins. You do obviously have to go off certain criteria, but there's a bit of leeway in that. I think ex-fighters perhaps would have a better gut for it, for lack of a better word, but that's not necessarily the case. I've also seen, I think it might have been Kansas again, the Athletic Commission came out and said ex-fighters don't really want it. Well, 2 reasons for that. Misha Tate hit the nail on the head with the tweet where she said fighters aren't really told that that's an option to them. I don't know what the money's like in it. Perhaps that's an issue. It's maybe not worth their time. I like the idea of ex-fighters doing it, but whether or not it's feasible or not, I don't know. Again, something you could look at the UFC doing with the Contender Series. Get a couple of the guys who may be retired, out injured, whatever it may be. Keep them involved, keep them employed. Give them a judging role and see how they get on. But again, this comes down to the commissions as well as the UFC, and I think the two of them need to get onto the same page, otherwise this will not get fixed at all. I think it might potentially help to have people not at cage side, maybe 1 or 2 judges away from the cage, because when I rewatch fights, I don't watch them with commentary, because a lot of the times crowd noise and commentary can sort of sway the narrative of a fight. And Joe Rogan in particular is very good at controlling the narrative of a fight. It's nothing against Joe Rogan at all. I think he's a great commentator, but because he's so respected and been in it so long, he can really drive the narrative of a fight. And you see this a lot on Twitter, where people will sort of cling on to every word he's saying, and use it as if it's fact, And I think that's definitely something that you can avoid by having people outside of the arena judging. In summary, as I said, I think the biggest problem with the point scoring system that they have at the minute is that everyone isn't quite on the same page. I think that it should be quite specific how it's laid out. I saw someone put forward the idea of half points. I'm not sure I like that. It's a little bit maybe too complicated, and I think it adds more margin of error for all of the judges. But let us know in the comment section down below what you think they should do about the MMA scoring. It definitely needs work. We're going to have a much more in-depth video about this with my, as I said, Mel from Jack and Mel Super at MMA. In the meantime, if you like our content, please subscribe, hit that little bell icon, like it, share it, tag your friends. If there's somebody that you know that would like this, please just share it on Facebook, because it really helps us out. We're making a real effort to grow the channel with multiple videos coming out each week. Our podcast comes out every Monday. If you ever have any questions for the podcast, drop us a tweet. Our Twitter, Facebook, all that will be linked down below. If you want to support the channel, the best thing you can do is just share it. If you want to support it with them cold hard dollars, then patreon.com/superatmma. And until next week, peace.